Well, I honestly prefer how South Dakota approached it. She said we're all adults and should be able to know if we need to stay home because we're sick, we need to stay home. You know, they did a lot less interruption in their business. I don't quite follow why areas in our state that have had no cases had to close down. There's just some things I definitely would have handled differently. I'm disappointed that the $1.2 billion that was given to our state to help businesses and people that are struggling, very little of it's hit the ground. Those are things that I think we could have done better. And I don't mean to be critical because it's a difficult situation. I do feel that people have made, it's become a fear topic. Very possibly, you know, I've had an uncle who's 87 recover for it, who was sick for just a few days, a little diarrhea, a little nausea, you know, I mean, but now his wife had an infection and of course it hit her a little harder. It took her a little longer to recover. But for the most part, it doesn't seem to have catastrophic effect on healthy folks. So sometimes I just not sure, you know, kids being out of school, all the interruption in our businesses has been worth the cost of, you know, the depression that's caused, businesses being wiped out, livelihoods. And you know, some of them are probably never going to get back. Well, I have concerns. I had a call from a constituent today that said that his daughter has, you know, lived in 3 or 4 different states here in the last few years with relatives in each of them. And she's gotten a call from 4 different states that have all received her ballot. So, I mean, there's a big concern there. When I've been out visiting with folks in my district, the accuracy of the voting records are not too good. I mean, literally 20 to 25%. Now, these are respondents that I was able to visit with. A lot of times folks aren't home. They had people on their addresses. Sometimes there might be 6 people. One example is a lady who's lived in a house for 32 years and she gets an absentee ballot for the previous owner every year. 32 years. So, you know, there are some issues there. If people want to be, you know, work the system, you know, the people down there that are verifying these votes are going to have their jobs cut out for them. And these interstate, how they work to verify somebody hasn't voted in this state and then turned around and voted in that state, it could be a real issue. You know, we've had some reports of ballots being, you know, I think somebody reported here in Great Falls that somebody had found a ballot tore up on somebody's lawn, and you know, and they end up knowing the neighbor, and it was clipped to their mailbox for the mailman to pick it up, and somebody took it off their mailbox and tore it up. So, you know, it's really disappointing that people aren't believing in our system to let it be fair and equitable, that people want to do things that, you know, it's just disappointing. So, you know, I would encourage people to hand carry their ballot or go vote in person. You know, I don't think I would risk letting mine be tagged to the mailbox or waiting for somebody to pick it up.
Right, that's scary. Wow.
Also, show you my past campaign. Here's 43 ballot chasers, we call them. So this is when somebody signs up at the last minute to vote, and they go in, they show IDs. Now these are 43, and you can see by the labels, I paid first class postage. These are supposed to be forwarded. They all came back to me, and that's only out of a few hundred. So how did these people vote or get registration to addresses that aren't good addresses? So yeah, I have my concerns. I never have liked the sales tax idea. I think it hits the poor people the worst. You know, average income and above, if you have to pay a little extra to get stuff, it really doesn't affect you. But if you're on the bottom and you're just scraping by, the sales tax hits you right in the kneecaps. So, you know, and the same with our elderly that are on a fixed income. So, yeah, I've never liked the sales tax. The research I've done on it also is a very cumbersome tax to collect. So you create a whole new bureaucracy. So that's going to take a chunk of that money. So it's not all going to help. So, you know, I really believe we have a fair tax system in our state, but it really needs some updating. It's gotten out of date. That's a ballot issue. This is not being brought before or through legislators to be done. This is something that, you know, the people have went through the process. There's sadly enough, there's a lot of out of state money being poured into it. It really, my opinion on this, you know, it's a voter issue. They're going to decide. Myself personally, the best thing I ever did when I turned 21 was quit drinking, quit smoking pot, and doing other drugs. You know, before that, you know, I really hadn't went anywhere in my life. But when I quit doing that, joined a church, married my wife, 39 years later, we've been very successful and lived the American dream. That's why we can give back now to serve in the legislature. But the other issues that people need to really know, and I've got a few notes here, and you have to realize this is still, there's an article here by Kelly of the Esquire and Esquire, where legal marijuana is a multi-billion-dollar industry in the U.S., but Canada's entrepreneurs still face many troubles. Okay, because here's where the problem lies. When you get down to here, it's maybe perfectly legal in the state, but it's still against the federal law. And it classifies as a Schedule I drug, and it's illegal. So guess what? When that dispensary wants to get a bank account, they can't get a bank account, because then they're aiding and abetting a federal offense, you see? So now you're talking about a multi-billion-dollar industry that's going to come into the state and do it on cash. So do you think on a cash level, how are we ever going to track the taxes? Are we getting paid the taxes? I mean, this is the same kind of hype we got with the gambling. We brought the gambling in, but how much money ever got to the school system? You know, so people really need to study this out before you start voting on it, because that, I mean, picture this. How do they make their payrolls? How do they pay their bills? They don't have a checking account. They can't put their money in the bank. They can't take credit cards. So it's a cash business. Now, if they owe all this tax, 20% to the state, why are they going to carry it over there in an armored car? You know, you see where I'm coming from? I mean, we're not talking about, you know, $50 here. You know, that's big business. So, I mean, what are they going to tote this stuff around? And, you know, you see where I have issues with that. So there's a lot of difficult things come out of it. You know, I've talked to other employers in other states like Colorado and Washington, and it's hard enough to find help without that. They say it's nearly impossible to find somebody who can pass a drug test, drive a truck, or any other business that needs somebody who can pass a drug test. So. Well, this again is you know, a question you can ask me as a state legislator, but I have no, you know, the legislature has nothing to do with what the federal government's doing. What I can tell you is that, you know, the whole system is broke. It's not just the insurance industry. I watched it with my parents as they passed, and taking care of them. I watched them be scrutinized with, you know, and subjected to tests that made no sense, but Medicare's paying for it, or Medicaid, whichever. You know, and the hospitals and the doctors and that, you know, I lost a lot of respect through that. I also found things like my dad was on 12 medications. I got involved in taking care of him because he was just having a heck of a time. When I started researching them medications, we got it down to 3, because the other ones weren't even supposed to be being taken together. But yet, see, you know, they get money for selling these drugs, and you know, the whole system. When my wife and I were first married, we used to have, not to do commercial here, but Prudential insurance. You know, everybody knows Prudential. They sold it. It was affordable. I think it's maybe like $110 a month to cover my whole family. You know, I have 6 kids. You know, I mean, it was, and you know, you had a little bit out of pocket. I mean, now you can pay, you know, at my age, 61, I'm going to pay $18,000 a year with 2 $10,000 deductibles. Well, what good is it? You know, and the other thing I seen, and I think there's been some work on this, and I've talked to a couple guys there at Blue Cross Blue Shield that they've been helping with this, is that if you have a medical experience, a lot of times you see bills coming a year later. I mean, that's just absurd, you know. So my dad learned what he would do is he'd go down after he had one of his bouts where he ended up in the hospital or whatever, and he'd be back home. And he learned to go in and say, okay, I'll settle with you, but you got to sign off that this is it. Nothing in the future. Even after he passed away, I had bills coming in way after we had settled his estate, you know, and it's just wrong. you know, and that is something that we may be able to look into and work on as a legislature. But these things that they pass at the federal level, as a state legislator, I don't have any say so. Biggest complaint I've heard on the doors is people are sick and tired of the negative campaigning. If there's one thing that stood out with folks that I visited with, they are sick and tired of the negative. Tell me, that's what they'd say. Tell me what you're going to do. Tell me about yourself or what you've done. But this negative, and of course, you can't blame and hold the candidates completely responsible for this, because some of it comes from these PACs, you know, and they can say and make up anything they want. You know, if there's anything we ever wanted to do, is we should pass legislation to hold people accountable for the claims they make, because some of these are so outlandish, it's not even funny. You know, I mean, just an example, my wife Lola's been in 2 terms. She has a card out there that they have a picture of her going to auction off Montana's public lands to New York, DC, and California. Now, come on, a state legislator doesn't even have anything to do with public lands other than maybe some policies. The land board's the only one, and you don't hold position. But this is the crap, excuse my language, that they put out. I mean, there's not even a sense of truth. It's fear-mongering, and it's sad that our policies or our politics have gotten to this level. I mean, really, it should just be. The other one point that I want to get in is the fact that the other one comes up is taxes, because you know, people are getting reassessed every 2 years. They may have done no improvements to their home, and yet their taxes can be going up 15, 20, 30% every 2 years. Well, for fixed income retirees and stuff, that can get tough. For a young couple, you know, or with few kids, that gets to be a struggle. And then on top of it, we're not allocating enough money for the schools, so they come back and need a levy, you know, and on top of that. So, I mean, we've got to fix this broke system. The other thing that really concerns me is the fact that we are losing brick and mortar businesses. I own one of them. It's a struggle. We're losing money to the internet all the time, and our sales are feeling it. Well, what you can see it here in Great Falls, there's empty buildings over in Zero Exit over the marketplace, over, you know, by Sam's Club. You know, you can go to the mall. There's not much up there anymore. Well, there's going to be a point where, you know, if there's no income, eventually they'll just let those properties go, like the big plant that was over in Missoula. You know, the county ended up with it. Well, what do they do with it? There's no tax revenues at that point. We need to be figuring out, how are we going to address this before it slaps us upside the head? Right now, I mean, I run from one thing to another. I work all day long. I never got ahead by working an 8-hour day. I grew up in a little motel on the west side, making beds, washing toilets, learned from a young age. I was out on my own at 16, went into business for myself. I contracted and did building construction for over 12 years. You know, I've been in multiple businesses since. We own a couple of Dairy Queens in town, at Great Falls Lumber downtown. We have apartment rentals. I bought my first one when I was 16. You know, I've lived a blessed life, especially once I quit drinking and doing drugs, and I went to church. Made all the difference in my life. But I've served there, and I've helped do audits for the church. I oversee 10 buildings for the church for maintenance. I just bring a whole lot of experience that the Lord has blessed me with, that I take to the legislature and share, because I have 14 grandkids, and they're pretty precious to me. And I think they deserve a better future than what we're giving them right now. Education, foster care, mental health. I could talk to you all day about the things that we need to address. But the only way it works down at the legislature is you got to find the money. You can't just want things. You've got a way, you know, and that's where I really hope to be on appropriations, where I can do some work, or taxation, because those are the things that are a core of getting these things that we've talked about, or that I've brought up. I really feel that's where we can make a difference. And I just feel like I bring a little more experience to the table than the person I'm running against. I bless her for having served, but I just feel like I bring a little more to the table, and I will work relentlessly to get some of this stuff going.